Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today we'll be discussing whether or not the Dark Wizard, Gellert Grindelwald, was responsible for the infamous Muggle conflict of World War II. The idea that Gellert Grindelwald, former flame of Albus Dumbledore turned Dark Wizard, could have had anything to do with the Second Global War of the 20th century has become a rather popular fan theory. There's of course the fact that the timeline of both Grindelwald's rise to power in the first half of the 1900s coincides with the historical events of World War II. More than that, however, are the blatant references to the Muggle War that are present, specifically in the Fantastic Beasts films. Let's take a closer look. Alright, so firstly, there's a timeline of Fantastic Beasts and Gellert Grindelwald's actions leading up to World War II. While the storylines within all 7 Harry Potter novels take place throughout the 1990s, the Fantastic Beasts series is set much earlier in the 1900s. The first installment, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, takes place in the year 1926. At this point in time, Gellert Grindelwald is still underground, taking part in the events of the film disguised as Percival Graves, an American Auror and the head of the Magical Congress of the United States of America's Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Revealing his true self at the end of the first film, the next installment, set in 1927, picked up where the previous one left off, with Grindelwald then swiftly escaping custody. Throughout the events of the second film, The Crimes of Grindelwald, we see the Dark Wizard begin to amass his following, known as his acolytes, all of whom eventually form the base of his army. At the end of the movie, he succeeds in luring even more witches and wizards to his side with his incredibly manipulative and impressive oration skills. If you're already seeing parallels to Hitler and World War II, you're not alone. During this particular speech, Grindelwald leverages his ability to see parts of the future, showing onlookers at his rally in Paris scenes of an impending Muggle conflict, promising that it will be both massive and incredibly violent. Specifically, he shows the witches and wizards displays of Muggle brutality, all of which are infamously known events from World War II that are remembered to this day. They include the Blitzkrieg, the Holocaust, the deployment of the atomic bomb, and more. The third film, The Secrets of Dumbledore, is then set 10 years later in the year 1937. This is, of course, 2 years before the start of World War II. In this installment, Grindelwald manages to use dark magic to manipulate his way to power by rigging the election for Supreme Mugwump, the official name for the role of the chairman of the International Confederation of Wizards. While ultimately his efforts are thwarted by Albus Dumbledore, Newt Scamander, and others at the last minute, the film ends with Grindelwald escaping from yet another arrest. Of course, as there have been no further Fantastic Beasts films, the events between 1937 and 1945, when Dumbledore finally defeats Grindelwald, remain a mystery. We do, however, know that Dumbledore and Grindelwald did duel in 1945, a fight which resulted in Gellert's final downfall and his sentencing of life imprisonment within Nurmengard, a prison of his own making. Now, let's turn our attention to the historical events of the Muggles' Second World War. Leading up to the beginning of the global conflict, Adolf Hitler began to amass power after the Nazi Party won a series of elections. In 1933, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany and systematically abolished the country's state of democracy with the support of the Nazis. World War II then officially began in 1939 and was waged between the Allied powers of countries, including the United States and Britain, and the Axis powers of countries, including Germany and Japan. The war finally came to an end 6 years later in 1945. So, is it possible that Grindelwald played a part in the Second World War? In my opinion, I think that we're meant to believe that yes, Grindelwald did, at the very least, contribute to the conflict, and may very well have been responsible for it. Here are a few theories as to why. Theory 1. He didn't predict the war would happen, he made it happen. As we've already covered in the second installment of Fantastic Beasts, Grindelwald shows a group of gathered witches and wizards his vision of the future, which includes multiple violent scenes from infamous World War II events. But what if Grindelwald didn't actually see the future? What if, instead, he created those visions, showed them to the wizarding world, and helped them become a reality? By creating dissent within magical society first, and then blaming Muggles for their violent tendencies, perhaps Grindelwald was able to manipulate these events into taking place. After all, Fear is a great motivator of conflict, and if the wizarding world believed and was afraid these things would happen, that could have created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But why would Grindelwald have done this? Well, because warring Muggles supported his argument that witches and wizards were superior beings who needed to take control of humans in order to prevent violence and destruction. Theory 2. He controlled Hitler with the Imperius Curse. Gellert Grindelwald attended Durmstrang Institute, the wizarding school for witches and wizards in the northern reaches of Europe. Presumably he himself was from a European country in that region of the continent, maybe even Austria or Germany. With possible ties to a country that led Axis forces during World War II, some fans have speculated that it's possible that Hitler's rise to power through the Nazi Party was actually orchestrated by Grindelwald. Perhaps Grindelwald returned to the country he was raised in and noticed Hitler's rising influence within Muggle society. He then could have overpowered Hitler and put him under the Imperius Curse, using Hitler's well-established fame within the Nazi Party to further inflame the nation through passionate speeches that were performed by Hitler, but that were actually the words of Grindelwald. So maybe it was Grindelwald who ultimately rallied the nation of Germany to such violence, all by puppeteering Hitler. In consideration of this theory, it would be undeniable that Grindelwald was responsible for World War II. Theory 3. He allied his acolytes with the Nazis. Similar to the previous theory, this one also suggests that Grindelwald may have had ties to Nazi Germany or a nearby Axis country. But unlike the last theory, this one is based on Gellert and Adolf Hitler having more of a partnership and less of a master-puppet arrangement. Perhaps in seeing Hitler's rise to power and ability to impassion his Muggle followers, Grindelwald saw an opportunity to leverage Hitler's cause to further his own. Grindelwald may very well have approached Hitler and revealed himself as a wizard who could support him in his political efforts, similarly to how the Minister for Magic is said to reach out to the British Muggle Prime Minister. This partnership would have benefited both men, as Grindelwald could have helped Hitler with his armed forces and attacks by allying the Nazis with the witches and wizards that made up his acolytes. As for Grindelwald's objectives, Hitler's violent and horrific acts towards humankind would have helped prove Gellert's assertion that Muggles were dangerous, capable of terrible things, and in need of guidance from the wizarding world. While none of these theories have been confirmed and can therefore not be deemed as canon, it's also worth noting that there's not a lot of information out there as to what did happen with Grindelwald during World War II. What this means is that it's really anyone's guess as to what Gellert Grindelwald's involvement was in this infamous global conflict. That said, it's my opinion that there have been more than enough rather obvious suggestions about his actions during this time, implicating him in the Second World War. So he was probably at least a little teeny bit responsible for World War II, one way or another. And with that, we've come to the end of today's video. What did you think? Do you agree that Grindelwald likely had something to do with World War II? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live